Okay, look, we'll make a start because we are on a 45-minute time slot for this webinar. Thank you so much for joining us in our webinar around food loss and waste. We're very fortunate to be joined by Kelly Mulholland from the FSSC Foundation. Kelly is Technical Manager, and she's going to share some insights with us, not only on the FSSC requirements for food loss and waste, but also a sneak peek at some of their survey results that was done to assess globally with their clients how they're going with food loss and waste reduction. I'll let Kelly introduce herself in a moment. My name's Leanne Singleton. I'm based in Australia, and I have been working on food loss and waste for the last 4 or 5 years. My interest in food loss and waste started while working as a GFSI food safety auditor. And in that time, I saw many, many examples of food waste. In that time, I didn't recognise it as food waste, but I came to see that we had an issue with food waste and that we had so much opportunity to reduce food waste within manufacturing environments, within retail environments, within catering environments, basically across the entire food supply chain. So I will be joining you after Kelly's session to talk about how you can make a start in your business to make some real traction on reducing food loss and waste. And I thank the FSSC Foundation for the foresight to move ahead and include requirements for reducing food loss and waste in the additional requirements for the food safety scheme, because it is a core function of food business to remain sustainable, is also to make sure that we minimise our impact. So over to you, Kelly, to introduce what you do and your role with FSSC and to take us through the FSSC requirements for food loss and waste.
Great, thanks, Leanne. Thanks also for inviting us to participate in this webinar, as we feel it's a really important topic. Just confirming you can see my slides that I'm sharing as well. Leanne, you can see them?
Sorry, Kelly. Yes, I can see it. Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you. So great to be here today. As mentioned by Leanne, I'm Kelly Mulholland. I'm the Technical Manager for Foundation FSSC. So I oversee our safety and quality related schemes and programs. So I have been with the Foundation for roughly four years now. Prior to that, worked in global certification bodies, looking at ISO 22000 and FSSC 22000 as well. So in today's webinar, and in my session, I'm going to take you through a brief introduction to Foundation FSSC and to the FSSC 22000 scheme for those of you who aren't as familiar with the scheme. I'm then going to explain why we've included food loss and waste in version 6 of the scheme, briefly touch on the scheme requirements and our food loss and waste guidance document, and then provide some more insights like Leanne mentioned with regards to the data from the recent survey that we ran on food loss and waste. So to start off with an introduction to Foundation FSSC and the scheme. So we as Foundation FSSC are an independent and not-for-profit foundation. We're the owner of the FSSC 22000 scheme, which is a food safety management system certification scheme. And we also are the owner of the FSSC 24000 scheme, which is a social management system certification. And our aim as a foundation overall is to deliver trust and impact beyond certification. So we support the consumer goods industry in protecting its brands and achieving its targets. And we do this by offering an effective ISO-based management system, as we know how important it is that brands and their reputations are protected. We're also a lean and a collaborative foundation, so we collaborate internally as well as externally with our stakeholders. And the overall goal is to help organizations contribute to the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, and thus create a better world. So this slide focuses on the FSSC 22000 scheme specifically, and just provides you with a brief overview to the scheme. So in brief, we started back in 2010 with FSSC 22000, which is just over a decade ago, which from a scheme perspective is still relatively young. We started with version 1, and now 15 years later, we're on version 6 of the scheme, and we're currently in the process of developing version 7. On the right-hand side of the screen, you can see the multiple sectors that we cover within the scheme. And this goes from animal feed through to retail, food manufacturing, and that's all the sectors that are covered within the scheme currently. We're also pleased to say that we have over 39,000 FSSC 22,000 certificates at the moment, and I think we're close to hitting 40,000. And whilst that's not the focus of the scheme, it does go towards showing the acceptance of the scheme in the market, as well as the trust that people place in our certification. We're also grateful for the support of our partners, which you can see on the left-hand side of the screen, which includes certification bodies, accreditation bodies, as well as obviously our certified organizations as well. And we're thankful for them helping us on our journey towards making a positive impact and creating a better world, which is the overall goal of the foundation. But first, let's give some background into why food loss and waste was incorporated into the scheme, as it's not a typical requirement you might have expected to have seen in the scheme in the past, as it's not specifically food safety related, which is what the scheme mostly focuses on. So how did we come to the decision to add food loss and waste into the scheme? So to start, the foundation became a member of the UN Global Compact in 2021, which made us think about how can we achieve impact and how can we make a difference in terms of the impact on the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs. So how could we make a difference? In this, we had to consider which of the SDGs we could have the biggest impact on as a scheme owner, together with our certified organizations. And although we as Foundation contribute to more than one SDG, with regards to the FSSC 22,000 scheme specifically, the food loss and waste additional requirement impacts on SDG 12 on responsible consumption and production. And from a foundation perspective, we wanted to help with the tools that we had available to try and best be part of the solution. Therefore, we added it into the scheme in version 6. And at the time, we had around 30,000 organizations that would then be bound to implement our requirements on food loss and waste, which is now over 36,000 organizations being bound to implement these requirements. And that's because around about 36,000 organizations of our overall 39,000 are actually food safety, food specifically related, whereas the other 3,000 are more contributed towards packaging, which is excluded from the requirement of food loss and waste at present in the scheme. And overall, we added food loss and waste into version 6 as it aligns with our overall global vision and being part of creating a better world. And with that being said, I'll move on to discussing what are our food loss and waste requirements within the scheme. So if we have a look at additional requirement 2516 under part 2 of the scheme, this is our requirement on food loss and waste. And it is applicable to all food chain categories except for category I, for food packaging manufacturing, as I've mentioned. However, it's still important to note that packaging really plays a vital role in the reduction of food loss and waste, especially in relation to the design of packaging and packaging materials. So it's still something very important to consider when a food manufacturer is considering how can they reduce their food loss and waste. So the requirements of the scheme include that organizations need to have a documented policy and objectives detailing the organization's strategy to reduce food loss and waste within their organization, as well as within the related supply chain that they have control over. Organizations are also required to have controls in place to manage products that are donated to not-for-profit organizations or to their own employees, as well as to other organizations. But very importantly, they still need to ensure that those products are safe for consumption that are donated. In addition, organizations need to manage surplus products or byproducts that they intend as animal feed or animal food, and they need to prevent the contamination of these products. And then lastly, these processes need to comply with applicable legislation. They need to be kept up to date by the organization. And then very importantly, the implementation of these requirements on food loss and waste shall not have a negative impact on food safety. So organizations need to consider that when they're implementing these requirements. So next, let us very briefly look at the guidance document published by FSSC on food loss and waste. So in October 2023, we published this guidance document, and it is for organizations on how to implement the FSSC 22,000 requirements on food loss and waste within their food safety management systems. It is a voluntary guidance document, so it's not mandatory, but it really does contain a lot of useful information. So we really do highly recommend organizations look into it. and it is freely available to download from the FSSC website. And once you receive a copy of this presentation, you can also click on the link on the screen and be able to download a copy of the document. So in accordance with the additional requirement 2516A with regards to the organization being required to implement a documented policy and objectives detailing the organization strategy, we have in the guidance document established a very basic three-step process, and it's a common process utilized in industry for food loss and waste, and that is on setting a target, undertaking measurement, and taking action. And I won't go into further detail on this specific part in today's webinar. However, we do go into detail on these processes within the guidance document. And we also, in addition to this, have some general guidance for organizations, as well as specific guidance for specific sectors in the supply chain within the guidance document. But I believe Leanne later on in the webinar will be going through this in a little bit more detail as well. If you would like to have a little bit more detail on our guidance document, besides obviously downloading the document, you can also watch our webinar that we recorded in December 2023. It was the FSSC's Insights webinar on food loss and waste, and it is still available to watch on our events page of our website. So please do also go and have a look at that as well. But now let's discuss in more detail the food loss and waste survey that we ran on food loss and waste. So we recently ran the survey with our certified organizations, and we did this to gain a better understanding of the status of their food loss and waste journey, as well as what methodologies they were utilizing, and also what challenges and benefits they experienced whilst implementing food loss and waste reduction in their organization. So currently we received over 600 responses to this voluntary survey, and we're very pleased with the participation that we received. And as the survey recently closed this month, we haven't yet fully analyzed the data. However, so far we can provide you with some of the insights into the outcome of the survey, as well as look at some of the benefits, learnings, challenges that were experienced by the organizations. So to start with on this slide, we'll look at what unit of measure is most commonly being used to measure or quantify food loss and waste reductions within the organizations that completed the survey. And the most common was that of weight, so measurements in kilograms or tons. Then came percentage and volume, such as in liters, and then also the economic value in the food loss and waste reductions. Something else that you can see on the slide is the category of other. And when we analyzed this feedback further, it was more about a combination of utilizing, for instance, weight and volume, or weight and economic value, for instance, as well as measurements being taken in count, so the number of units or pieces that were reduced. Then what tools are most commonly used for quantification and measurement of food loss and waste? Here we see the most common being under the category of the topic other. So when we analyze this further, this included utilizing tools such as Excel spreadsheets, as well as ERP systems such as SAP, amongst other ERP systems. And then you will see next was the food loss and waste quantification method ranking tool that is being utilized. Then examples of how organizations ensure the accuracy of the food loss and waste data, or how they actually verify the accuracy of the data. And this includes, but isn't limited to, utilizing measuring equipment that is being calibrated, such as calibrated weighing scales and flow meters, as well as looking at both internal and external calibrations and verifications. Then next was undertaking cross-checking and reconciliation. So for example, mass balance exercises, looking at the input versus the output, including waste, as well as the comparison of production records with raw material usage and finished goods records. And then there was also the inclusion of cross-verification between the ERP systems and the data that are generated against the manual logs. So comparing those together, and then also utilizing stock counts and inventory reconciliation. And that all contributed towards the accuracy of the data. Other things that contribute towards the accuracy included undertaking regular internal audits, as well as cross-departmental reviews. So cross-departmental reviews between production, QA, and finance, for example. Then also the utilization of standardized forms and templates for the data collection and reporting, because this also assists with ensuring the accuracy of the data, as well as likely the consistency of the data that is being received. Also, external verification, such as third-party audits for sustainability reporting, or verification being done by the waste collectors themselves as well, for example. Then digital systems and ERP integrations for traceability and automated checks, as well as cross-checking of the ERP data with the physical measurements also contributed towards the accuracy. And then lastly, physical on-site checks, so such as on-site verification of the waste removal and the weighing of that at the time, and then also visual inspections and confirmations of the actual disposal processes that are taking place, so actually verifying that. Then we also asked organizations if their countries set any targets, national targets for the reduction of food loss and waste. So the outcome of that is majority of them that actually completed the survey, because we must keep in mind that this is based on those that completed the survey. Majority indicated that there were no national targets set within their country, and this is something that FSSC will also look into further. But now getting on to some of the more interesting parts of the results from the survey. So having a look at the main learnings and the main challenges that were experienced along the food loss and waste journey of these organizations. So starting with the learning, some of the main learnings included the importance of accurate data collection, as consistent recording and monitoring is essential in order for organizations to identify waste hotspots and also to enable targeted intervention for the food loss and waste that the organization is specifically experiencing. Then the second main learning is around employee awareness and engagement. And this is because training and cultural change significantly reduces waste, but you need to ensure that your employees have a good awareness and training on this in order for that cultural change to take place. And then also involving frontline staff, so staff who are actually working on the production floor, also leads to practical solutions. So those were learnings experienced and areas that organizations can really look at. Other learnings included identifying process optimization. So where could the organization optimize certain of their processes? And it was seen that even small operational improvements could yield quite a big reduction in food loss and waste. So that's something to consider. And then also better planning and forecasting also helped reduce overproduction and therefore spoilage and reduce the overall food loss and waste for organizations. Then another point was cross-functional collaboration, which I also mentioned in one of the previous slides. So cross-functional collaboration was another important learning, and that was the alignment between production, QA, logistics, and procurement, for example. And this is critical to food loss and waste reduction, and as well as the communication between the different teams and teamwork also helped to prevent loss across the supply chain as well. So ensuring that your organization is really collaborating internally amongst the different departments can really help because everybody has a part to play. Then regarding some of the main challenges that were experienced by those who undertook our survey, this included the complexity of data collection, as it really can be a complex process, as well as tracking losses across multiple stages is quite resource intensive. So organizations really do need to plan effectively. And then a lack of a standardized measurement tool was also another challenge experienced. And then being able to accurately undertake and establish what is the organization's baseline data as well, because you need the baseline data in order to compare your year-on-year reductions. Then another challenge was behavioral and cultural resistance, because changing long-standing habits and attitudes can be difficult. So again, it comes to awareness and training of personnel and giving them the understanding and the tools that they need to also help you in this process. Another challenge was the technological and infrastructure limitations, such as the need for investment in monitoring systems or calibrated equipment, as well as limited capacity for waste segregation within an organization, because that's something that also needs to be considered. You need to have the space for that and the infrastructure to undertake that advanced waste segregation as well. Then operational constraints included balancing production efficiency with waste reduction goals, as well as variability and inconsistency in raw material quality, as well as seasonal fluctuations, because that can also impact on the food loss and waste that is experienced by the organization. And then lastly, on the challenges, navigating legal requirements for waste disposal as well as for food donations also posed a challenge for the organizations, and there are areas that they then need to undertake as learnings and establish further practices in. While overall the challenges would need to be undertaken into what can we learn from it, how can we go and implement things to help assist and reduce those challenges. Then on to what are the main benefits that have been experienced or the advantages as a result of the food loss and waste reductions, or as a result of implementing food loss and waste plans within the organizations and strategies to reduce it. What were those main benefits and advantages? And at the top of the list is cost savings, which was the most frequent mentioned benefit in the survey feedback. And this includes cost benefits from reduced waste disposal and handling fees, saving on energy and water consumption, as well as improved financial performance, profitability of the organization, and then also lower raw material costs, as by minimizing production losses and non-conforming products, companies also then use a higher proportion of their purchased raw materials effectively, and then less materials also end up as waste, reducing the need for additional purchases as well. Then the second benefit is process improvements, so including enhanced operational efficiencies, better production planning and yield optimization, reduced rework, fewer non-conforming products. So these were all benefits. And it also included improved equipment utilization and reduced downtime for organizations. Then the reduction in greenhouse gas emissions, lower carbon footprint through less waste being sent to landfill, as well as improved resource efficiencies for water, energy, and raw materials, has also seen a positive environmental impact, which is a benefit for all overall. And then other benefits included improved yields and quality of products, and as well as a benefit to the compliance and the reputation, as reduction in food loss and waste strengthens sustainability credentials for the organization and also has a positive impact on brand image and stakeholder trust in the organization. So in conclusion, we as FSSC, we look forward to further analysing this data and seeing what learnings we can take from it as a foundation, and seeing how we can continue to support our organisations on their food loss and waste journey, and then hopefully be able to share some further insights at a later stage as well. So that concludes what I wanted to discuss with you today. So I'll hand back over to Leanne, where she'll be giving us some practical insights in managing food loss and waste in organisations specifically. Thanks, Leanne.
Thank you, Kelly. And look, I'm super impressed that we had 600 responses to your survey, which is wonderful. And to hear the benefits, and that's exactly what I want to speak to now, to say that this is very achievable for organisations, and many organisations just don't know where to start. So I will just share my presentation. If you have any questions, please pop them in the Q&A, and we will do every effort to make sure that we can get to those questions. So Kelly, can you see my screen?
Yes, I can.
Perfect, thank you. So as Kelly alluded to, we have food waste across the entire supply chain. So whether you're in farming, whether you're in post-harvest handling and storage operations, whether you're in processing or manufacturing, you're in distribution, you're in retail, or all the way through to food service and catering operations, there are many stages in the food supply chain where we know have unique challenges with their food waste. And so I think it's really important for any organisation to say this isn't just something that is a manufacturing problem. It isn't just something that's a problem at the retail end. It's something that, picking up on Kelly's comment about collaboration across the supply chain, to have a true impact, we need every supply chain actor to pick up and reduce their food waste as it occurs for their particular part of the sector. And I think the biggest challenge in working with businesses has been shifting our mindset to address food waste. And as I alluded to at the start of the introduction, we don't always see food waste. We don't always recognise food waste when we see it. I know I see it as a quality defect, or I saw it as product not meeting spec, or I saw it as surplus manufacturing, or I saw it as meeting a pre-established waste tolerance. I didn't automatically think of it as food waste. I thought that's a cost of doing business. However, if we shift our mindset and we start actively looking for all of those food waste outputs, they're immediately apparent to us. So it is a shift in our mindset to recognise waste when we see it. A couple of examples is just produce that doesn't meet a specification, unharvested crops due to perhaps a better than expected growing season, and also retail returns. And the picture I have here is bread, as in many countries there are retail returns back to the bakers for unsold bakery products. So we already know that in terms of where do we have the most food loss and waste across the food supply chain, we know that there's a disproportionate amount of food waste impacting fresh produce, impacting bread and bakery products, and impacting high value products like meat and dairy products. So what are some steps to reduce food waste in your workplace? And I really want to pick up on the Target Measure Act that Kelly introduced in her slides. And it is used throughout the industry when we talk about a simple approach to reducing food loss and waste. So what do we have to target? So picking up on some of the additional requirements that FSSC have around food loss and waste, we need to target food waste reduction by establishing food waste reduction goals and measurable targets. This gives us something to aim to, what we're going to achieve and how we can strategically work towards that. Part of targeting is forming, leading, or actively participating in a cross-functional food waste reduction team. So I really love talking about how we go about reducing food waste, because it really does mirror so many of our food safety or our HACCP methodologies, where it's not one person in a business that reduces food waste, it's a whole team of people that bring different levels of expertise and skills to reduce food waste. The second part of the process is measurement, and Kelly spoke in the survey about measurement, about perhaps the techniques that are used, but also about some of the challenges in measurement. And we'll talk a little bit more about this in my slides, about establishing that benchmark and how that changes, but how important it is to know what is your initial level of waste so that you can measure against that to show that you're actually meeting the targets that you've set. And then in Target Measure Act, we have multiple steps that fall under the acting stage to reduce food waste. So I like to break it down into a step-by-step process where the first thing we do is we walk the line, or we look at our process and we look at that to identify our food waste hotspots. So where do we need to focus our attention? If you like, I call these the CCPs of our food loss and waste. It's where do we need to focus our attention? Because where we see a hotspot, which is a disproportionate amount of food waste, either by volume or by value of that food waste, we need to understand all of the underlying causes of that waste. And this is where we come to the second step in acting, where we use the root cause analysis technique to drill down and look at the true causes for each hotspot. And in my experience, I've found that there's never just one cause for a food waste hotspot. There are multiple causes. And to address that hotspot, we need to have solutions for each of those underlying causes for that waste output. So leading on to the next step in this flow chart, which is to develop, prioritise and pilot some potential solutions before you implement them so that you know that they're practicable and that you can sustain them. And then for all of those food waste outputs where you're not able to reduce the amount of waste, you still have options. You can look at valorizing all of the unavoidable food waste that you have. So that might mean if you have surplus food waste, it can be redirected to be donated. It can go to animal feed applications if it's not suitable as edible food, to go to food rescue organisations. You could upcycle perhaps byproducts to go into other product streams, or you could potentially even send your waste for energy conversion. So the aim is always on retaining food as food for people to consume for as long as possible. When this is no longer an option due to the nature of the food waste, then we start looking for alternate uses so that we avoid sending it to landfill, which is the real intent here, is to divert food waste out of landfill applications. And then the last step in this process is to document and maintain a comprehensive food waste reduction plan. So let's have a look at what some of these steps involve. The first one is around establishing food waste reduction objectives. So just as you would for any other program you were implementing, we want to define some SMART objectives: specific, measurable, objective, relevant, and time-bound objectives that align with what your organisation's priorities are. So they could be around meeting some sustainability goals that your organisation have set. It might be on cost efficiency. And I really think the huge opportunity in addressing food loss and waste is actually to reduce your costs and increase your profits, aside from and together with any sustainability actions that you may take. It also works towards your social responsibility, so donating food for hungry people. And supporting those objectives would be some quantifiable targets for each objective. And just a couple of examples here could be to reduce an inventory waste by 20% within 6 months, or diverting 50% of edible surplus food to donation partners within 3 months, or no avoidable food waste to landfill by the end of the following calendar year. So there's lots of quantifiable targets that a business could set. I would say to anybody starting out on this process, pick something that's achievable for your business and then build on that success. The next one is measurement and creating a baseline of your current food waste. So it's important to do the measurement. However, if this is a barrier to you starting, I would say make a start on some hotspots that you already know exist, and you can build in the measurement piece around that. In terms of how do we start the measurement, a lot of businesses, just as Kelly pointed out in the challenges, is they haven't set up their data collection to enable easy collection of the information. So while working with organisations, sometimes we've just started really big picture. We've said, let's look at product in and product out as a mass balance to give us a really, really rough high-level estimate, which we can build in accuracy. And don't be surprised when you start measuring food waste if you find that in your first year of measurement, because you don't have the data set that is easily accessible, that you have to make a guesstimate on what that is. And then as you build in accuracy around that data, you might find that your food waste actually increases. This is not necessarily an indication that you're producing more food waste, just that your data measurement is more accurate. So don't be discouraged by that. It's important to have a look at what sort of measurement practices could you put into place. And I'll talk about 10 different measurement activities, not just the 2 or 3 that are in most common use. And also conduct regular waste audits in all of your key operational areas. So have a look and analyse trends over time to see where you're actually making an impact. So if we talk about different measurement techniques, I like to refer to the WRI, the World Resource Institute's Food Loss and Waste Protocol. It describes different types of measurement techniques and supports them with some really well-worded examples. So the first 2 that Kelly mentioned in the survey that people returned is that the most common measurement methods are around weighing of food waste, so direct weighing or volume assessment if you have a liquid product. Look, this is great. Because it actually gives you some really nice, well-defined data. But if that's not available to you, Don't let that be something that deters you from starting the process. So you could use counting if you look at individual items to calculate a total weight gain. You could look at waste compositional analysis. So if you have mixed waste, you could actually then sort into different categories of waste and do a projection of what that volume is. You could use records that you already keep to do a desktop review to make a start on collecting what you think your food waste measurement actually is. Diaries and surveys can also be used where people just make a note of how much waste they have when certain circumstances occur, like a line breakdown. You could use a mass balance where we look at averages, historical data, or industry benchmark figures to estimate the likely amount of food waste generated. And I've certainly worked with many bakeries that know what the industry benchmark is for bread waste, and they can benchmark themselves against that to see where they fit in the industry. Are they good? Are they average? Do they need to improve? And lastly, you could even use modelling. So looking at calculating food waste by measuring your inputs, your outputs, your stock level changes and weight changes during processing. So there's lots of different methods you can use. You can use approximation by saying, I know that if we fill a palicon of carrots, for example, might weigh 600 kilos. If I take away half a palicon, it's about 300 kilos. And starting at that level of approximation. Just make a start is my guidance there. The next one is walking the line to identify your food waste hotspots. So just as you would when you do a hazard assessment for food safety, you can use the same methodology. Start at the very start of your process for goods in or inventory management and walk your way through the process to say, where do I have a food waste output? And talk to operators because they see this process every day. Ask them, am I seeing this process the best it ever is, the most efficient that it is? Or what is the worst that we would see this process in terms of how much waste might we have when things don't go right or as planned? We know from looking at published information that there are a couple of waste hotspots that we could anticipate. So one of these would be in the storage area for ingredients that are expired or spoiling in storage. Perhaps they've exceeded their best before date and you need to get an extension on those products. The other place is that we would look for waste would be product that could be retained in ingredient packaging. Think of tomato paste. Trying to remove sticky products from packaging is also a significant factor when we look at retained product and contribute that towards how much waste is there in an overall process. We could look at what product that is also retained in processing equipment. So how difficult is it to clean out our equipment to make sure that we maximise our ingredient conversion into finished product? Look at spillage at product transfer points. So if you're in a manufacturing environment and you have a conveyor system, how much spillage do we have of product which isn't able to be salvaged because of the contamination potential? Have a look at equipment cleaning and first line flush. So this is particularly important in liquid processing. So when we work with dairies, we have a look at how can we improve the process so that we wash less and less valuable milk product down the line through cleaning and product changeover processes. Also, we know a hotspot can be around line stop, start, and product changeover. So looking at can we salvage some of those product which is edible? It might not meet requirements for stated weight. However, it could be something that we're able to donate to food rescue use. Look at damage to packaging, and that I have found that to be a really big driver for food waste is when we have packing lines that have been built for speed and efficiency and we have next to no capability for a repack or a relabel. So any packaging defects potentially mean that there is product wastage. And have a look at waste out hotspots that might be around packaging, weight or label rejects. So also remember in the box here around the tip, it says there may be interconnected causes of food waste at all of these steps, which can lead to a cumulative increase in waste. If we have a look at root cause analysis, I just wanted to share an example with you because I think an example is an easy way to talk through this, and we will share the slides after this. I'm conscious of the time here, but sometimes what we think the cause isn't the actual cause. So in this particular example around a food waste hotspot caused by a packaging machine equipment issue, it actually comes down to a lack of preventative maintenance. So always drill deep to see what the true problem is that is driving your food waste problem. When we look at solutions, really important to prioritize those solutions. So not every solution is going to be impactful enough to show the benefit of implementing that solution. So I always say to people, have a think about what is the ease of implementing that change versus the potential impact of that change on food waste. We are aiming for quick wins first. Valorising unavoidable food waste. I've taken this flow chart from our training course that we have on how to reduce food waste in manufacturing, and it looks at a decision tree that you can use to look at what is the most attractive option for the waste you have. So obviously we start off at the best option is to reduce that waste in the first place, salvage saleable product for sale, moving right down the line from donating to food rescue to animal feed, upcycling to a higher value item, and then diverting to energy recovery, producing compost or a fertilizer to improve soil condition, with the very last option being sending that to landfill. When we talk about documenting a food waste reduction plan, here's what it might look like. There's a couple of different categories here that you could create. So there is no template on how you need to do this. It's really up to you as to how you're going to create this strategy for your business. So if you're to overcome your food waste hurdles, where do you start? Begin with curiosity. Start looking at what can we do, what's in our control, because we'll get to the things that are out of our control a little later in the process. Reducing food waste doesn't compete with other goals. It actually is complementary to those. If you're worried about upfront costs or limited resources, most of the effective interventions I've seen are actually at the start of a process, and they're very low cost. So it doesn't mean a significant investment in new equipment to reduce food waste. And if you're concerned about lack of awareness or staff buy-in, start with an awareness campaign. Have a food safety champion nominated in your business. And lastly, if you would like to have detail on how you can do this in a very easy step-by-step process, FoodSure together with Senara Learning have created an online food waste training course. There's 10 modules, and we step you through this process to build your capability to do this within your own business without the need to rely on consultants or anybody else to help you put this process in place. And it's a great skill to have because it's certainly an emerging issue across the food industry. So I just wanted to check if there were any questions in our Q&A box. No, we don't have any questions. I have finished with 2 minutes to spare. Would anybody like to post any questions in there? Okay, that's fine. And sorry, at the end, I realised there's always so much you want to talk about with food loss and waste because it's such a big opportunity. Kelly, did you have any comments you'd like to make wrapping up?
Thanks, Leanne. Yeah, I think you've really done a brilliant job of explaining the whole process of how to go about actually implementing this in an organization. And I think what we can take from this is some of the key points. So that collaboration, I think it's really important. I think really making sure that the organization understands food loss and waste, because they really need to be aware of it in order to go about this implementation. And then I think, like you've mentioned, just really making sure that they understand their process and they're going to speak to the staff on the floor in order to truly identify what is actually happening in order to make an effective reduction. So I think those would be the key learnings for me.
Great. Thank you, Kelly. And look, I think that I just want to, my final message to everybody is this is really super achievable. You just need to make a start on it. It is something that is easy to just make a small start and have that grow. In all the businesses I've worked with, I have never not seen food waste. So if people are thinking we don't have any food waste, I challenge you to go back, change your mindset, take another look, because I promise you'll find it. So thank you, everybody. We're going to finish on time. We will make this recording available after the event, and we will share it with those that couldn't make it. So thank you so much. Please feel free to reach out to us if we can help with further information on this vital matter as we move ahead to 2026. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly.